Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 152. Chapter 152. Anatoly Kuragin was staying in Moscow because his father had sent him away from Petersburg, where he had been spending 20,000 rubles a year in cash, besides running up debts for as much more, which his creditors demanded from his father. His father announced to him that he would now pay half his debts for the last time, but only on condition that he went to Moscow as adjutant to the commander-in-chief, a post his father had procured for him, and would at last try to make a good match there. He indicated to him Princess Mary and Julie Karagina. Anatoly consented and went to Moscow, where he put up at Pierre's house. Pierre received him unwillingly at first, but got used to him after a while, sometimes even accompanied him on his carousals, and gave him money under the guise of loans. As Shinshin had remarked, from the time of his arrival, Anatoly had turned the heads of the Moscow ladies, especially by the fact that he slighted them and plainly preferred his gypsy girls and French actresses, with the chief of whom, Mademoiselle Georges, he was said to be on intimate relations. He had never missed a carousal at Danilov's or other Moscow revels, drank whole nights through, outvying everyone else, and was at all the balls and parties of the best society. There was talk of his intrigues with some of the ladies, and he flirted with a few of them at the balls. But he did not run after the unmarried girls, especially the rich heiresses who were most of them plain. There was a special reason for this, as he had got married 2 years before, a fact known only to his most intimate friends. At that time, while with his regiment in Poland, a Polish landowner of small means had forced him to marry his daughter. Anatoly had very soon abandoned his wife and, for a payment which he agreed to send to his father-in-law, had arranged to be free to pass himself off as a bachelor. Anatoly was always content with his position, with himself and with others. He was instinctively and thoroughly convinced that it was impossible for him to live otherwise than as he did, and that he had never in his life done anything base. He was incapable of considering how his actions might affect others, or what the consequences of this or that action of his might be. He was convinced that, as a duck is so made that it must live in water, so God had made him such that he must spend 30,000 rubles a year and always occupy a prominent position in society. He believed this so firmly that others, looking at him, were persuaded of it too, and did not refuse him either a leading place in society or money, which he borrowed from anyone and everyone, and evidently would not repay. He was not a gambler. At any rate, he did not care about winning. He was not vain. He did not mind what people thought of him. Still less could he be accused of ambition. More than once he had vexed his father by spoiling his own career, and he laughed at distinctions of all kinds. He was not mean, and did not refuse anyone who asked of him. All he cared about was gaiety and women. And as according to his ideas there was nothing dishonorable in these tastes, and he was incapable of considering what the gratification of his taste entailed for others, he honestly considered himself irreproachable, sincerely despised rogues and bad people, and with a tranquil conscience carried his head high. Rakes, those male Magdalens, have a secret feeling of innocence similar to which female Magdalens have, based on the same hope of forgiveness. All will be forgiven her, for she loved much, and all will be forgiven him, for he enjoyed much. Dólokhov, who had reappeared that year in Moscow after his exile and his Persian adventures, and was leading a life of luxury, gambling, and dissipation, associated with his old Petersburg comrade Kuragin, and made use of him for his own ends. Anatoly was sincerely fond of Dólokhov for his cleverness and audacity. Dólokhov, who needed Anatoly Kuragin's name, position, and connections as a bait to draw rich young men into his gambling set, made use of him and amused himself at his expense, without letting the other feel it. Apart from the advantage he derived from Anatoly, the very process of dominating another's will was in itself a pleasure, a habit, and a necessity to Dólokhov. Natasha had made a strong impression on Kuragin. At supper after the opera, he described to Dólokhov, with the air of a connoisseur, the attractions of her arms, shoulders, feet, and hair, and expressed his intention of making love to her. Anatoly had no notion and was incapable of considering what might come of such love-making, as he never had any notion of the outcome of any of his actions. "She's first-rate, my dear fellow, but not for us," replied Dólokhov. "I will tell my sister to ask her to dinner," said Anatoly. "Eh? You better wait till she's married." "You know, I adore little girls. They lose their heads at once," pursued Anatoly. "You have been caught already by one little girl," said Dólokhov, who knew of Kuragin's marriage. "Take care." "Well, that can't happen twice, huh?" said Anatoly with a good-humored laugh. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 152. I hope you liked it. I'll now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, Day 152. Watchful and natural guardians, call your mother. Robert Lovelace is the villain of Samuel Richardson's Clarissa, or The History of a Young Lady. He is a notorious rake who first abducts and then rapes the eponymous hero of that great 18th century epistolary English novel. Mr. Lovelace, like Anatoly Kuragin, cares only about gaiety and women. To this end, he develops a system of libertinism based in part on his understanding that wickedness is a stronger bond than the ties of virtue, and that it is in the nature of the human mind to be villainous. If today's chapter of War and Peace proves anything, it's that Anatoly Kuragin is a convert to the Lovelace system. Anatoly is a reckless, unrepentant debtor. He's a burden to his father, who in this chapter agrees to pay his son's debt once more, but only on the condition that Anatoly goes straight to Moscow and find a suitably rich heiress to marry. Anatoly accepts his father's money and heads to Moscow. Once there, however, he displays no intention whatsoever of seeking a suitably rich heiress to marry. Instead, he carouses about with gypsy girls and French actresses. So maybe he's not as dumb as he is mischievous. There's another reason, aside from his rake's philosophy, that precludes Anatoly from marrying. The reason is that he's already married. A few years ago, he married a poor Polish girl. Naturally, he's abandoned her and arranged with her father a payment of a large sum of money in exchange for the right to live freely as a bachelor back in Russia. Class act, this guy. Once in Moscow, he also falls in with Dólokhov, not exactly a man of exemplary virtues himself. It is with Dólokhov that Anatoly unveils his Lovelace-like designs for Natasha Rostov. He plans to make love to her. We already know from yesterday's reading that he's well on his way down that path. If Natasha wishes to resist his advances, and if Anatoly himself wants to reform his ways, then the two of them should take a page from one of Clarissa's letters, wherein she articulates her practice of virtuous living, similar to some of the Stoic philosophy of A Year of War and Peace. Quote, "So, my dear, were we perfect, which no one can be, we could not be happy in this life, unless those with whom we have to deal, those more especially we have any control upon us, were governed by the same principles. What have we then to do but, as I have hinted above, to choose right and pursue it steadily and leave the issue to Providence?" End quote. How best then for Natasha and Anatoly to choose right? Echoing yesterday's meditation, they should find someone worthy to model their behavior after. It seems to me Anatoly's father has some good advice for him, while the old Countess Rostov can provide a model for Natasha. Daily Meditation. At every age on this side of matrimony, it will be found that the wings of our parents are the most necessary and most effectual safeguard to preserve us from the vultures, the hawks, the kites, and the other villainous birds of prey that hover over us with a view to seize and destroy us, the first time we are caught wandering out of the eye of our watchful and natural guardians and protectors. Samuel Richardson, Clarissa, or The History of a Young Lady. All right, that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 152. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation to PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 153 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.